purposeful integration between, you've heard this term before, between the centre-based training and what happens in schools. And you as a mentor act as a bridge between the learn that statements of the ITT ECF, but with the learn how statements, which is really the practicing of things that they can actually do in the classroom as associate teachers. Before we start that though, I just wanted to go back and just remind you where we're up to in terms of what we've delivered from a science specific point of view. So these are the first 3 subject sessions that took place in September, October, November, where we looked at what is science, motivation and engagement, practical management, risk assessments, the nature of science curricula. Then we looked at direct instruction and effective explanations, and looked at sort of teacher-centred or instructivist approaches to education versus guided learning or inquiry-based learning. We looked at demonstrations and dangerous demonstrations. We did quite a lot of modelling and analogies, which is very powerful and very important in science, as we know. And then we looked in some detail at questioning strategies and methods of checking for understanding in relation to quite a few different areas of science. Then we changed things slightly this year and did some half days, obviously on Fridays together, but we did half a day on numeracy in the morning, and then we did the afternoon on scientific inquiry. Then we did a similar thing the following fortnight, where we did half a day on specifically how you support SEND students with different needs in science, so science specific strategies for that. And we spent half a day looking at literacy, oracy and English and additional language and how to support that. Last Friday, not the Friday just gone, the one before, we spent quite a bit of time looking at developing subject knowledge, which was different for different people. So they were doing some self-study on that. And then we looked at the AMTLP, which we'll talk through this afternoon, and some adaptive teaching strategies, which are quite difficult to sort of find science-specific adaptive teaching techniques, but it was more about the application of techniques to that, to the subject or to the subject knowledge. Coming up this term, you've got a session next Friday. We're going to look at, so it's this Friday, a bit more weeks mixed up. This Friday, we're going to look at using the AMTLP, and we're going to actually do a walkthrough of me teaching them as a fictitious class to sort of mirror what they're going to be doing when they're on placement with you. We're also going to look a little bit at medium-term planning and how to plan strategically ahead for a whole term. We will do some work a couple of weeks later on the format of GCSE exams, mark schemes, things like that. And then we'll look at required practicals. We'll do a little bit on diversity and controversial issues, and then a little bit on A-level subject development, and then a final bit on heat transfer, which is a nice way of bringing together lots of concepts we've studied over the course of the year, and a little bit on outdoor learning and field trips and things like that. So coming back to what we said at the beginning about you being a bridge, if you think back to the tier 1 mental training that you've had, you'll know that was an image you'd seen before. But we're going to introduce AMTLP. We're going to think about the practicable strategies that are part of that process, and then we're going to do a little bit of deliberate practice and finish off with talking a little bit about sending out some snippets of SPA to you. So first of all, I'm going to cold call somebody and try to model what we do as teachers about what is your understanding of AMTLP, what the associate teachers are expected to do as part of that, and then what are you as a learning coach expected to do. So Stuart, can I ask you, because you're not within the ATLP, can you unmute and tell me answer to any of those questions?
Yes, so for the AIM-TLP, my understanding is it's basically getting them to think about who they're wanting to monitor and why. So what the goal of the lesson is going to be, and how you'll be able to assess as many people as possible by using a handful of students to get a generic idea of what the classroom is doing. So that's what my conversation piece at least.
No, you crystallised that really nicely. And then can I ask Rosie, can you just unmute for us and tell us anything that you can in response to those? Hello. So you're unmuted, Rosie, but I can't hear you. Oh, okay. Ah, same problem as last time. Okay. I won't pick on you then. Can I ask Joel, can you add anything to that?
I think only just like in terms of what we're expected to do, that will obviously the associate teachers send it, and then we can discuss it in mentor meetings and stuff, and help them to work out who their targets are and stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think a lot of that will take place outside of mentor meeting time, but the minimum expectation is that you do that sort of pre-lesson dialogue once a week for them using that form. You might initially want to, particularly with areas where they find subject knowledge difficult, you might want to co-construct them together. Um, so, sorry, we've got people popping in and out, just to check in. Right, hello, Mark. So we've got a range of things there to just go over to make sure we're all clear. So what happens during this intensive training and practice? So what they've already done is last Friday they had some introduction to the 5 practicable strategies, which is preparing the lesson, which is filling in the AMTLP form, designing a monitoring pathway in the first place, then the concept of lapping the classroom, and then when they discover something that they need to stop and readdress or stop and clarify again, that would be classed as a pause point, and then giving students time to improve based on the teacher's input during the pause point. So this Friday, I'm going to revisit those 5 things again. We're actually going to take a slide deck of resources, and we're going to do an introduction to the electromagnetic spectrum. And we're all going to do that for Key Stage 4. And I'm going to give them the slide deck, and then together we're going to put together the left-hand side of the ADTLP form. So we're going to decide between us what powerful knowledge, what skills, what prior knowledge they need, what misconceptions they might come with. And then we're going to walk through the whole process. So I'm going to teach that lesson to them, and I'm going to model the process of lapping, stopping every so often, because some of them I'm going to plan for them not understanding certain things, and then show them the process of upgrading as well. So then they're going to go into lessons and observe to see what's happening actually live in the classroom, and then we're going to come back and reflect and discuss on at the end of the day. So that's the plan for what's happening this Friday. For you though, day 3 of the ITAP, so day 1 was last Friday, day 2 is this Friday. Next week, at some point on a day that is suitable for you, and please feel free to be flexible. And you can even be as flexible if it doesn't happen, it can't work next week, and you want to do 2 days the week after. It's really not a problem. It's just there are certain elements that need to take place during the day that you've decided to be an ITAP day. They can actually go in any order. The ones on the screen there, as long as the planning an AMTLP for the lesson that they're going to teach, the pre-lesson dialogue obviously has to happen after they've planned it. So activity 2 on that list there has to happen obviously before activity 1. But you can do the other things in any order that you want. So they're going to plan a lesson at some point next week that they're going to teach the week after. Sorry, the day after, not the week after. They're going to plan a lesson for the day after that they're going to deliver. You would have a pre-lesson dialogue with them. Then during the day, they just need to do an observation where they're going to go and observe another colleague, focusing on looking at assessment techniques. They're going to teach one lesson as normal, but making sure they employ some checking for understanding techniques like cold calling, like show me boards, those kind of things. And then there's some academic reading to do. And then there's the opportunity to teach an element of the practicable strategies on day 1. Day 2, again, same time at some point during the week, what they're going to do with that is concentrate more on enacting the practicable strategies and then reflecting on how effective they've been. So they'll teach the lesson that they planned the day before or the days before. they'll need to have a post-lesson dialogue with you, and they'll also need to do again another lesson observation of a colleague, some academic reading, and then there's a reflection on practice to complete. I'm just going to pause at this point because has anybody got any questions? We've sent out a booklet that's got all this in that went out this afternoon. So is there any questions that anybody wants to ask now?
Paul,
no,
will,
sorry,
Paul,
oh, sorry.
will Ellie,
Go on, John.
Paul, will Ellie be doing the same? Will Ellie be doing this as well?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Although, in terms of her, because she's salaried, if she's teaching like a full lesson, a full day,
yeah,
there won't be the capacity to come out. I wouldn't expect you to do cover for things. It might overspill over more than 2 days.
Okay, I'll speak to her when she's done this on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, she'll be really keen to just engage with all of the materials. I know she will, but you can completely be flexible.
Yeah, okay,
it's a
thanks.
good question. Rosie just put in the chat, associate teachers completed for every lesson a simplified version of lesson planning. Yeah, that's right. Does the micro lesson need to be with the learning coach? No, it doesn't. It could be with anybody. But the lesson that the full lesson that they're actually teaching, particularly on day 4, ideally should be with you, because you'll be the one giving the observation feedback and post-lesson dialogue. Okay, any other questions? I don't think there's any other ones in the chat.
Sorry, Paul. How long is the micro lesson supposed to be in this case?
It varies. It's really up to you. I think if it's an opportunity for them just to practice show call because they're not very good at it, then it's just finding, even if it's like 10 or 15 minutes of doing that, it doesn't matter really. And again, we can be really flexible. It might actually even be something as simple as just facilitating an exit ticket in the last 5-10 minutes. It's just an opportunity to make sure they've had a chance to just hone in on the practical strategy, a particular assessment technique, rather than thinking about the whole lesson. That's the idea. Okay, so again, stop me as you want to. But the 5 steps of intentional monitoring are here. So lesson preparation, monitoring pathway, lapping, pause point, and upgrade. What's the point of this? The reason why we're focusing on this term is not only because we're looking at assessment as a key strand and adaptive teaching as a key strand of our curriculum, but the importance of basically knowing that a lot of practicing teachers don't do this very well. And so at this stage in initial teacher training, we think it's really important that they do monitoring with purpose rather than just floating about. So actually going hunting for things and engaging with lots of students. So it's about trying to gain that information, making sure that we're thinking ahead to the core knowledge, the real powerful knowledge and skills that we want them to, that we want students to retain. It makes us not assume, we talk about this curse of knowledge when we're all subject experts, and actually we'll make assumptions that children know things that they don't. So it's making them really think back to what prior knowledge the students should have or need to have to be able to have that new learning. Thinking about misconceptions that they might have, we was talking about mass and weight. I went to the Royal Sutton School on Friday and went to observe an ECT who was doing the ramp with the forces mass times acceleration, with the trolleys with the weights and the light gates. And we were talking about the fact that you're applying mass to the end of the pulley, but actually you want them to think about it in terms of force. So you need to use the right words to describe what you're doing, even though you're adding mass. What you want to be talking about is changing the force. Or changing the weight. So it was just one example of where the misconception can cause us with problems. It makes you circulate around the classroom, and again, sometimes where this is done badly in schools through CPD, teachers just tend to see this as about you drawing a line on a seating plan and just following it blindly around in a line. We've tried really hard to make sure that we stress that that's not what it is. It's not just wandering about on a pathway. It's about monitoring with intent. It makes us not miss out on speaking to all students, but it also allows us to check in with priority students more frequently and identify some of the problems that they might be having, which we could indicate might be indicative of the rest of the class's problems as well. It also makes us think about not just blindly carrying on and getting through the stuff, but actually detecting a problem and strategically pausing to deal with it in the moment. And that is one of the fundamentals of adaptive teaching. But also that you celebrate success. That's one of the things, is about highlighting good students' work and exemplifying that. Sometimes that can be done quite badly as well, because it can embarrass children. So it's quite important that if you're going to do it and you're going to openly show students' work, that you do that in an appropriate way. And we talk to them about that as well. And then the upgrade part is making sure that students act on feedback and upgrade their work. So we're going to look at each one in turn, and I'm not going to talk through them. I'm just literally going to give you a minute just to read them. And then John, if you can put your virtual hand down for me. What we'll do is just have a quick read of that, and then we'll just put some more detail on the next slide. Okay, so that in its essence is what it is. And these are the prompt questions that are actually on the MTLP form. So powerful knowledge, skills, prerequisite knowledge, misconceptions, pre-planning questions to check for understanding. So that would be hinge questions predominantly. Any opportunity to put in scaffolding in advance to support learners, and then how they're going to demonstrate that they've learned something using deliberate practice. And the majority of the time during deliberate practice is when the intentional monitoring will be happening. So that's the lesson preparation. So on the form, the lesson preparation takes place on the left-hand side of the AMTLP form. And really, this is about getting them to develop a mental model for a way of thinking about lesson preparation, so that every time once they don't have to do this anymore, that they still go through these thought processes. That's the idea behind it. Okay, any questions so far on the lesson prep side of it? Okay, so the monitoring pathway, the next bit, is it's pre-planned, so with some strategy behind it. And the idea is that you're moving to go and check in with certain priority students, but also that you don't forget everybody else. So this is a step beyond. You might have seen on the teacher target setting toolkit, you might have seen the concept of pillars, where you pick someone who's disadvantaged, you pick someone who's got an EHCP, you pick a high prioritainer, and you pick another person. And once you go and see those 4 people, if they're all doing fine, you assume everyone else is. This is a step beyond that. This is more sophisticated, because not only does it check in with more priority students, and you're actually planning for that, over a sequence of lessons, you're making sure that you actually cover everybody else as well. So we have indicator students, and we want to plan that so they don't have to be thinking about checking in with the indicator students and remembering who they are during the lesson. We want them to have planned that in advance of time. And again, give you some examples there of who those indicator students might be. You may check in with certain students more frequently than others over a series of lessons, but actually there should be other priority students as you go along as well. And then the Tiffany's, for those of you that don't know, this comes from Leverage Leadership. It talks about the sorts of the homogenous blob in the middle. You've got the naughty ones, the clever ones, and so on, and then the disadvantaged. But then everybody else is sort of lumped together in the middle, and quite often you realise that you haven't spoken to them at all for weeks. And this is designed to counteract that. So it's about making sure that we strategically check in on our Tiffany's within at least once within a series of potentially 6 lessons. So what we really would like them to do, and what I'll be telling them to do on Friday, is to take a class that they're teaching fully, to take 6 AMTLP forms, lay them out on the table, and then decide on their 6 priority students across a span of 6 lessons, and make sure that everybody is covered within that run of 6 or 7 lessons, but that also the priority students are checked in on regularly as well. So that's going to help them also to plan a sequence of lessons rather than just working from lesson to lesson. This is something that obviously we're raising this now because we want you to be proactively looking for this and making sure they are actually doing what they've planned to do, and that they're walking around and talking to the people that they've said they're going to. Again, on the form where this sits, and the AMTLP form is in the top right hand corner. But we were wanting you, like I say, to check that they did check in with the priority students, and if they didn't, why not? If they did, what kind of interaction was that like? Was it just a quick everything all right, yeah, and then moving on? That's not what we want, because that's about self-reporting, and we try to avoid that. We really need to check for understanding when we're having that dialogue. And does that interaction with those students actually support them to make progress if they're not making progress? I'm going to pause at this point because we've done 2 of the 5 steps. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay. Right, so this bit is where I go slightly controversial. We've had some arguments about this within the team, about lapping. And I think I'm not entirely comfortable with the name of it, because when you think about doing a lap, if you're in a relay team or something, you just tend to you just go round in a circle, and once you've completed a lap, you've sort of done your job. I think it's sort of indicates that lapping is passive, and it actually shouldn't be that. And there are 2 parts to it. If you work at Arthur or potentially within the ATLP, they talk about doing a lap for compliance. I've seen this absent in a lot of lessons, particularly during do it now tasks, and the teacher at the end of the do it now hasn't checked that the majority of students literally haven't written anything, puts the answers up on the screen and says copy those into your book, which is really poor, isn't it? So first of all, the teacher should have noticed students weren't doing the task, and then should have done something about it. So what we say first is, when a task's been set, that you then wait a few seconds, and then you go around and you check in on every single student to make sure they are doing what you've asked them to do. We've asked them to narrate this, and I think that's, again, something for you to look for. So they'll say something with, again, the power of scripting. They'll say, right, I'm going to come around now and just look over everybody's shoulder and make sure that every single person has started, or that every single person has now got to question 2, or whatever it might be. So that's that, going around checking on everybody. Also then, scripting to narrate positives. Well done, Jimmy. I can see that you've already made a good start. It's good to see all of the back row are halfway through, or the first question, or whatever it might be. Having those quiet interventions with people who aren't, so it could be someone who's forgot their pen, or someone who hasn't plugged their laptop in, or their iPad in, or whatever it might be. So it's lapping to make sure that everybody is on task. If it seems that a lot of people are not clear on what they're doing, you might say a lot of people have got to question 2 and have stopped. Are we clear on what that question means? So, you might clarify your instructions during that first lap for compliance. Remember, this is not about telling them to be formulaic as well. I think it's something that, this is a formula, this is a process that we're training them to try to get into the habit of doing, but actually we've got to make sure they're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, and they do know why they're doing it. So Compliance lap comes first. Then the teacher then moves and does a second lap, checking for understanding. So that might be a quick look over people's shoulders to see if things are moving in the right direction. And again, we're encouraging them to narrate what they're doing so that students have that metacognitive development as well. So they might say something like, I'm coming around to see if you've included the tier 3 words that we've talked about. Or I'm coming around to make sure that you've drawn your graph with a pencil and a ruler. So you're going around to check that they've done what you want them to do. Then what the plan is to go to the priority students first. There might be verbal feedback during that sort of bit. There might be some opportunity to do some live marking of work as they move around. And then it's checking in with everybody else. So during that, you might decide, or they might decide that everybody's making the same mistake, that we pause and address that. We'll come to that one in a second. So where the lapping comes in is this part of the form. So they'll actually be filling this in either during the lesson or after it. And what I would say with this bit here is it talks on the form about looking at students' work. And like we said before, what you're doing there is you're looking for examples of what a good one looks like, really, and examples of what a bad one looks like, and making note of that, actively clocking success, but also clocking where things are not coming out as they should be. So that's what those two boxes are for. So they might want to write these things down at the time, but they might fill them in afterwards as they're reflecting on what happened in the lesson. Pause point is really straightforward. So during a checking for understanding lap or following it, the teacher decides to stop and say, okay, this seems to be happening. Let's stop and address that. Or everybody's got the wrong idea about this, or everybody's moving through this faster than we thought they were going to. So what I want you to do is miss out on question 3 and 4 and go straight to question 6. It's those kind of things. So it is what it says, a pause point. Making sure, obviously, that they've got 100% attention, which is a practical strategy we looked at before. Tracking the speaker, addressing misconceptions and errors, potentially showing exemplar work, which might be exemplar work from the student in the class, or it might be one you've prepared before. And so that's that one. And the last stage then is upgrading. So this is just making sure that after you've paused and given some input, is that you're giving the students time to reflect and identify their errors, misconceptions, and then correct those. Depending on your school and department policies, you might be doing different colours. Quite often it's green for that, but yeah, you might be correcting or upgrading work in a different colour, or just adding to what you've already done. It can be sometimes redrafting work as well. The whole point of the change of colour, obviously, is to see the impact of the intervention that the teachers put in place. So that's something that a lot of schools do, isn't it? So again, that comes to the same place on the form. For that is the opportunity to do the pause point, but also to see provide time for that upgrading of work. Okay. Any questions at all about the whole process? There are some videos in the booklet we've sent out this afternoon. Each section that we've just talked about, or I've talked at you about, has a link to a short video that explains each of these steps. I mean, it will be saying the same thing that I've just said, but if you do want to go back and watch those, you're most welcome to. Can I just ask you to put in the chat if you're feeling happy, or if you've got any questions? Just put you can put a thumbs up in the chat, or you can put clearly understand, or I don't quite get this. Just take a minute just to do that. Thanks, Kaylee. Thank you.
I am following Paul. I just can't see it, but I'm understanding everything.
Is that, are you marked by mobile?
Yeah. I don't know what's going on. Sorry, bud. But I'm here, so yeah.
It's all right. That's all right.
You've been you're full of clarity tonight, so I'm following it. It's okay.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we're just in 25 assessment clinic preparations for LTD. So I think we're all here as well. Oh, one. I've had one. Apologies. Okay. Right. Good questions. Thank you for that. Because I think when you're explaining anything to anybody, sometimes you think, oh my God, I've got the most obvious thing. So to answer Andrea's question, after Easter, when they're teaching a much higher timetable, where if they're competent, if their mental model is sufficient, that they're going through this process and you're seeing it in lessons, we're going to say to them that from after Easter, they only have to fill this form in for the one lesson a week that they're having a formal observation of. That's not the case at this stage. We're asking them to do these for every lesson that they're teaching, which there was a bit of a whinge about when we said it to them all. But actually, it's not about filling the form in. They do have to fill the form in. But what we're looking for is that they can demonstrate to us that they are thinking about the things we want them to be thinking about. And they'll have to fill a form in for that to happen, for us to see that. Obviously, you'll see it necessarily because you'll see it in the lessons as well. But from an outside point of view, we won't. So they are still doing AMTLPs for every single lesson, only up till Easter. Okay, right, we're going to move forwards. Now, it's just gone 25 to, and this is meant to be an hour session, but I'm going to dedicate a little bit of this time to you to do something. And what I want you to do is to have a go at going through this process. And I know that you might have come with different levels of experience for this, but all I want you to do is just to think of a lesson that you're teaching tomorrow or the day after. And what I want you to do is just spend literally 5 minutes just writing down a few notes on answering the prompts that are on the left-hand side of this form. So jot down for me, what's the powerful knowledge that you're teaching tomorrow in one of your lessons? What are the skills? And there might not be skills, it might just be knowledge, but it might be a mixture of both. And then the other questions as well, what prerequisite knowledge do students need to have? Are there any anticipated misconceptions? And what questions are you going to ask? And then what we'll do is we'll go into breakout rooms and we will share some of our thoughts, because it's about helping you to then model this process to the associate teachers. I thought it would be useful if we had a chance to sort of model it with each other. So I'm going to switch my microphone off and switch my camera off just for 5 minutes, to give you some time to just quietly fill in those questions that are on the left-hand side. Everyone okay with that? I'll take no responses that you are. There was one quick question from Rosie. Do we expect the associate teacher to share the form with the class teacher for every lesson? Yes, we do, because it's really important that in place of a formal plan, that they've at least thought about what they're going to do and how they're going to do it with those questions. I think at Cardinal Wiseman, because the booklets are quite prescriptive as well, this is designed so that they don't just take the pre-prepared resources off the shelf and just open the book and just hope it all works smoothly. It's to make them actually engage with the thinking process behind planning. Okay, we'll do a 5-minute timer then, and then we'll come back online and share some thoughts with each other. Okay, everybody. Give me about 5 minutes just to do that and just reflect. What we're going to do now is we've got 4 breakout rooms. I've put it for 15 minutes, but when your conversations come to a natural conclusion and you've talked to each other about your lessons for tomorrow, then you can just come back into the main room. I'll float between the rooms as well, and then we will bring everything together after that. So off we go.
Hello, Paul. Can you hear me?
Right.
Oh,
Okay, everybody should be coming back in. Okay. I hope you found that a useful exercise. I think sometimes, obviously, you know what you're doing in relation to these things, but I think sometimes it's just worth bouncing it off other people and just getting people to sort of think about how they've interpreted some of the questions. One of the things that you'll see about the difference between knowledge and skills is about knowledge. You tend to use a lot of nouns, so it's you know, I know the parts of the reproductive system are in the male is and listing the organs, the functions of them. But the skills section in science, it tends to be more verbs really, like doing actions like labeling or drawing or calculating, things like that. So just going to take a little bit of feedback from people about anything that came up in their discussions. And I'm just going to pick, I don't know who I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick Mark, if you're in.
I am here. I'm here.
Okay.
What feedback do you want? Just in terms of what we discussed?
Yeah, not the content so much, but like, did you find it a useful process to be thinking in that way?
Yeah, so I think misconceptions is like my first point when I first think about a topic. I think, right, what are they not going to get? What are they maybe going to come to the lesson not knowing? And just having a discussion with our colleagues here is, yeah, we're all in the same boat. And it's not just like the Friary, for example, that the misconceptions are in. It must be across the nation, basically, that kids grow up, be it because of things they're exposed to in everyday life or just because of lack of scientific understanding. But yeah, there's definitely misconceptions that are quite broad and quite common, which we need to try and address. So yeah, starting to think about them before you go to the lesson, and knowing that we're all aware of it, it's just something we need to make sure we're doing constantly, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. We did talk about making assumptions about knowledge that students have as well, particularly when it came to the room I was in to start with, talking about reproductive organs, and some parents might have had quite open conversations with children about that, and some might have not discussed it with them at all. So children can come with either different amounts of prior knowledge or misconceptions about that knowledge. So, okay. Kaylee, were you in the same room? You were, weren't you?
Yeah, I was in that one.
Is there anything else you want to add? Because I haven't spoke to you like about going through this process.
No, I think it is just really useful to think, because I think when you become more experienced, sometimes you just do it automatically as well. So I think to put yourself in the position where you have to, you do it in all of the lessons you're planning. I think that, sometimes you might overlook things, or, so to actually sit and do the time now and really think about it in the way you've broken it down, and it makes you sort of realise what the associate teachers have got to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't do it explicitly because they don't know how to. Whereas, like you say, for you, it's become a habit that you go through when you're planning as an experienced teacher, which is something that we're trying to develop in them early, so that when they go and do that on a more regular basis, well, not that they do it consistently. I know I spent a lot of my career not doing any of these things, which I openly would admit, but how impactful that they are if you do them. Okay, lovely. Any further questions? I'm conscious of 2 minutes to go. Any other questions about anything particular? I've put on the screen that the snippets, that are sort of the really brief overview of what I do on Fridays, I've been terrible at sending those out. I started well, and then it all went downhill. So I'm going to get myself together and send those out as a bit of a batch runs, and then try and get on top of it this term. But if you do want to see the PowerPoints from the sessions, you can look online and see the whole PowerPoints for training sessions that I deliver for the science cohort. But if there's any questions that are not relevant for everybody, you're welcome to stay on the call. But other than that, thank you for coming. It's 16:58, and hopefully I look forward to coming to visit you, and I should have some details out in the next couple of weeks about the date that I'm going to come and see you next. But thanks for coming along, and have a good evening.
Yeah, cheers, Paul. Thank you for putting on my
Cheers,
chaos of devices. Cheers.
No problem.
Hiya.
Hello.
I just wondered if you had any update on OMR and if you'd heard any more.
Not a thing. No. which worries me really. But I don't know what it's like organising funerals in India. I would imagine it's quite complicated and long-winded. But yeah, I haven't heard anything. I'm gonna get in touch with his cousin actually, because it was his cousin who contacted me in the first place. Haven't had any direct contact from him at all. So
No, I know he contacted Helena because she said she knew he wasn't coming in. But yeah, he didn't expand on that anymore with her.
Helena.
Mystery, English.
Oh, okay, right, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So she
Yeah.
knew on the first day, but she doesn't know why. Just that he wasn't going to be there to start with. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, if I had, I'd have told you. But I just literally I had something I just haven't heard, and it's gone off my radar. But I know that he was very close to his mom because she'd been ill for quite a long time. I don't know how much I told you about it.
Yeah, you said that it'd been for a while. It'd been ill, yeah.
But it was really odd. I mean, you'll know as a biologist, I had to look it up. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it's some kind of viral infection of the brain that just doesn't go away. And it's really rare, but it's also really difficult to shift, and it just makes all your organs shut down. So she'd been really ill for quite a while. And obviously in India, the care system in India is odd in that somebody has to be there to look after you and care for you. Otherwise they won't treat you. So he's been over previously, and his wife was there in the interim while he's been on placement last term. His wife was out there like caring for her.
Oh, wow.
And so he's been living on his own in his house. He lives on the Crescent. Do you know the Crescent?
He said he lived really close, yeah.
Yeah, just if you go from Queen Mary's up the hill to the Arboretum Hill, and then it's that little island where Carvery is, turn left. It's that road he lives on. So, yeah, I'll try and message him again and see if I get any further thing back. But I mean, it might end up looking like he might defer. He might take an interruption studies because I know it'll have knocked him for 6. He was really upset last term when she was ill. But yeah, he's a lovely guy.
No, he seems lovely, and he's got a niece at our school as well. So, but I don't know, that might be on his wife's side then, rather than that side, 'cause she's obviously in. So, but I don't like to obviously ask her because that's completely separate. So,
Yeah. I will just write myself a note now to make sure that I try again different mechanisms to get in touch with him. But I'll give you a shout. I'd like to say no news is good news, but it's probably the opposite of that. So, yeah. Are you in your car?
I am in my car, yeah.
Whereabouts are you?
Outside NBC Gymnastics in Sutton.
Oh, right. You're about to go to the gym?
No, I've been dropping the little one off at gymnastics. So when you set us on that task, I was like, oh, perfect. That gives me the perfect opportunity to run him into the gym and then get back out to the car to carry on.
Oh, awesome.
So, yeah.
No worries. Right, well, I'll drop you an email as soon as I hear anything.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll speak to you in a bit. All right, take care.
And bye.
See you later. Bye.